I'm really interested in your perspective on Brexit, given your interesting background split between policy historically and now from a business perspective. You're obviously a strong believer in Brexit.
Yes.
Do you feel the same way now sitting in a business chair about it?
I do, very much so. I mean, during the campaign, we heard a lot about how the economy would tank if Britain voted to leave, how growth would be cut, unemployment would go up. That hasn't happened. In fact, the British economy has done pretty well, since we voted to leave. So actually, I'm even more a backer of Brexit now than I was back then.
It's starting to turn, though. We saw slightly weaker data numbers of late, and we did see a big plummet in business confidence in the last month. Do you think there is worse ahead?
I think that once the talks start on the 19th of June, the actual Brexit negotiations themselves, and once the election's out of the way, all the uncertainty about the election, I think confidence will be high. Because people will see that the Prime Minister wants to go for an open Brexit. She wants Britain to be a trading nation. She wants to make sure we can keep our trade links up with the European Union, to have that free trade deal that we want. So I actually think confidence will be much higher once all the uncertainty is out of the way.
Is better than a bad deal. Is that a line you would agree with?
I would very much agree with that. You can't go into a negotiation saying that you're going to stay at the table whatever happens. You've got to say that if we don't get the deal we want, we'll walk away. But at the same time, I'm very confident that there'll be a win-win situation, that actually both sides will see that a good deal for both sides will benefit both the UK and the rest of the European Union.
That's not necessarily the line we've been hearing from the EU, who are quite concerned that other countries may follow the UK out the door if they're perceived as being too lenient. What would you say to that?
I think there's a difference between some of the language from the European institutions, particularly President Juncker, and the member states. People like Chancellor Merkel, who of course is the most important person in a sense in this process, she's much more pragmatic. She realised that the UK has chosen to step away, and now both sides need to be grown up about this and get a good deal.
Let's look at your exact role now. You really bridge politicians and business people.
I do.
And the business is very broad insofar as some investment firms, some entrepreneurs, and then some big corporations I imagine you also speak to. Is everyone's approach to Brexit and how it should be carried out the same, or do you see differences?
Well, there are several things people are interested in. First of all, the whole negotiations themselves. What's going to happen over the next 2 years of negotiations? How will it pan out? What will the deal look like at the end? People are fascinated by that. Then people are also interested in what will happen in the UK itself. How will all of those EU laws be transposed into British law with this Great Repeal Bill? And also, what sort of trading policy will the UK go for? What sort of trade deals we will try and get? But also people are interested with the ongoing elections. Of course, the UK election. We recently had the French election going on. Later this year we've got the German elections in September, Austrian elections, Italian elections at some point. People want to know what's going to happen in those campaigns, how that will affect the whole Brexit process, and also the markets more generally.
Transition period for Brexit. 2 years is what's mooted initially, but people do think that's going to be longer. Do you expect Brexit to be a short-term success, or will it take quite a few years for the successful aspect you anticipate with Brexit to play out?
Well, the key point is the trade deals, and the government's already working on those trade deals to make sure that all the preparation's been done, so you have several deals signature ready for the moment at which we leave. So I think those benefits will come straight away. The key point about the election, I can bring it back to that. By having the election now, the Prime Minister has given herself a full 5-year term. And this means at the end of the Brexit process in 2019, she won't be pressured, she won't be rushed into having an election very soon. She'll be able to have the negotiations, then the transition period, and then a bit more time before the next election in 2020.
Assuming, of course, the Prime Minister is able to retain her position.
Well, very true.
And the polls have been tightening quite a lot. What's your take on what's happening there?
Well, the polls have tightened, but I would be astounded if the Prime Minister wasn't re-elected at the election on Thursday. I think she'll actually get back with an increased majority, will actually give her a stronger hand in those negotiations.
Now, one similarity between the Conservative and the Labour manifesto has been a much more interventionist approach to markets. Is that something you support, or do you think it's something that business will react very kindly to?
I think business is looking for a very business-friendly Brexit. That means being free trading. It means having a slightly lighter touch on the regulation once we leave the EU as well, and also making sure that Britain is competitive when it comes to tax rates, and that's very much on the government's agenda. I think during the course of an election you get different pieces of rhetoric and manifestos or what have you. We should judge the government by what happens afterwards, and I'm confident the government will make it a business-friendly Brexit.
And if Labour was to win, how would business cope with a 26% mooted tax rate for corporations?
I think business confidence would really go through the floor if Labour got in. Some of the policies they're putting forward are really quite left-wing, quite socialist in many ways. It would be Britain going back to the 1970s in terms of high rates of tax, high rates of regulation. It wouldn't be good for the economy.